Right, well, without any further ado, we'll get started. Welcome to the Natural Hazards Resilience Teacher Professional Development Series, a mouthful of a series, where we provide free 1-hour sessions of experts speaking to you about natural hazards in Colorado. And today we get to feature RISE teachers sharing their experiences doing community resilience projects through the RISE Challenge competition, formerly the Rocky Mountain Environmental Challenge, which many of these teachers who are with us today know it as. So I am Justin Zacher, and I'm the program manager for EarthForce here in Colorado. I have the great job of getting to work with innovative, inspiring teachers who want to do fun, different stuff in their classrooms with their students, including engaging students in community problem solving, which is what EarthForce is all about. I'm also joined, of course, with my counterpart, Alyssa McConkey, who is a program manager with us as well. Yeah. Alyssa, do you want to share what you do real fast?
So my work with RISE is helping to take this program that we've Justin's been running in Colorado for the last few years and take it out into new communities. And so we're taking RISE to Montana and Illinois for the first time this year. And so hopefully we'll have some of our partners from there on board and then be able to share this with folks just getting started in new places. So thanks all.
Yeah. Great. So might as well give you guys a brief introduction to EarthForce while we're at it. So EarthForce is a national environmental education nonprofit. Our wheelhouse is environmental action civics. So we have developed a 6-step process for taking students through investigative and problem-solving journey in their community to address some environmental issue that's there. We provide teachers with educational professional development and support. And then we have like this plethora of classroom resources online, and of course, program managers to help with planning questions. I've been known to do cameos in classrooms. I especially enjoy that part, but it's not specifically in my job description. But it's totally something I love to do, and I'm happy to do it for anybody who needs help. And we also do a lot of work around developing partnerships in the community, bringing in stakeholders to talk to students about their issues, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great organization. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that we can be sharing all of this work with you. I'm going to introduce Katja Schlosser, our awesome colleague from HeartForce, real fast, and let her talk about the HeartForce program. Do you care to share?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Katja Schlosser. I work on a very similar program to EarthForce called HeartForce, the Hazard Education Awareness and Resilience Task Force that's based at CU Boulder at an environmental research institute. And we're funded by NOAA. And I'll say we complement EarthForce really well as far as we have created some curriculum that focuses on wildfire, flood, and drought. And it's very place-based for Colorado teachers. And we have some introduction to the science of hazards, and then scenario-based role-play games that are really fun to play. And then we encourage teachers to use the EarthForce process to do resilience projects in their classroom. And our focus, I'll say, is rural Colorado. So we work in areas far from the Front Range with teachers around the state. So thanks so much, Justin. And I'm really looking forward to getting to learn more from your stellar teachers today. So thanks.
Thanks so much. And I want to just say also, one of my favorite things that HeartForce provides is they have a grip of videos. Like, I mean, just a ton of videos that relate to natural hazards in Colorado that would be really useful for sharing with students if you're teaching about natural hazards. So real quickly before we get started, as a way of introducing kind of the topic and the focus for today, we are going to be hearing from teachers who have experience in doing natural hazards mitigation and preparedness projects in the community with their students. And they've been a part of this work of ours with FEMA called the RISE Challenge, which is a part competition, part summit, and part educational program that leverages the new standards around natural hazards and community experts and students' interests in doing stuff that's relevant to their lives and their community to improve the resilience of communities by focusing on natural hazard issues, selecting one to work on, and then working with stakeholders to develop a project or a solution which they can pitch and receive implementation money for and win prize money for at our end of year summits. It's a pretty great program. It's really fun to see the summit and hear the students' ideas, to see students pitch to a panel of experts who represent offices from county, city level to the state and to the federal level. So it's just an all-around great program and great opportunity for folks who are interested in taking those natural hazard standards and really turn it into some kind of project that they can do meaningful change in their community with. And just to advertise real quickly, this series that we've been doing with Heart Force is not over. We actually have a couple more sessions left this fall. We have December 9th, Colorado Hazards of 2020 session, the science behind droughts and fires, which I highly recommend attending. And there's registration information both on the Heart Forest page and on our Earth Forest Rise Challenge Colorado page. As well as December 16th, where we do another introduction to the RISE Challenge. For those of you watching this or in the audience who are interested after the session and want to know more about the RISE Challenge, I highly recommend coming to that session. Just an hour-long session, but you'll walk away with some ideas for moving forward with projects of your own. Okay, and of course, how to get a hold of us. You can reach me at jzacharyn@earthforce.org, and there's Koch's information as well. I'm going to stop showing my screen. Okay. So just a reminder, everyone, we are recording this session. This is going to be a really beneficial session. We're going to hear from expert teachers, and I hope that you guys don't mind being on screen forever. We will be uploading to our YouTube, and I'll be sharing this link, that link with you all going forward. If you don't want to be seen, feel free to black out your screen. I would encourage you to leave your faces on though. So I want to introduce real fast our speakers. I'm just going to start with how I see them laid out on Zoom. So Brittany, you're first. Brittany Peterson is a teacher, science teacher at Blevins Middle School in Fort Collins. Real fast, Brittany, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into education, and your time with the RISE Challenge?
Okay, so I've been teaching, this is my 11th year teaching. I started teaching high school in Denver and then moved to middle school. I got to teach in Estes Park with Steve for 5 years, and then I've been at Blevins ever since. And just, my dad was a teacher, so it just kind of fit my personality wise. And the first year I was at Blevins, the RISE Challenge came up, and I thought, oh, this is awesome, something really cool to do with my kids, and just kind of fell into it and have done it for the past 3 years.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. Next is Steve on my screen. Steve, can you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So yeah, my name's Steve, and I do teach up in Estes Park. I had the privilege of doing outdoor education for a couple of decades up here prior to going into the classroom. And like Brittany said, we got to teach together for a little bit. And about like the same time that the original Summit Challenge began, we had a little flash flood up here that year, and the kids got real interested in the issues involved with that. And so we started off the first year doing the flood, and then the last 2 years we've been working on wildfires. And so, and I work with 6th grade students almost exclusively in that area. So
great, thanks for sharing, Steve. And next up, Sam. Sam is a teacher at Compass Community Collaborative School. Did I get it right? Yeah. In Fort Collins.
It's a mouthful. Lots of C's. Yeah, so this is my 7th year teaching. My first 4 years I was at Poudre High School, and then I was on the development team for Compass as we were getting built, which was exciting. Got into teaching because it's similar to Brittany. It was kind of a family trade. I avoided it for a long time, but eventually got there. Yeah, and I found our first year at Compass, actually, Justin reached out, I think, to Jan, our principal, and Jan was like, yeah, this seems like a Sam thing. And sure enough, it was. It was pretty much right up our alley in terms of doing project-based learning and things like that. So we've been doing some projects with them for the last few years. Did one that was exclusively on flooding, which was cool because we're right in Fort Collins. We're right on top of the hill next to Spring Creek Park, which is right where the really nasty flood happened in '97. And so we had spent a bunch of time there, and it was cool to be able to walk kids down there and see the memorials and stuff. Like, and they're like, "Well, I never even saw this was here." So it was nice to kind of get them attached to that space. And then last year we kind of opened it up and did natural hazards in general, which was also a fun take on it. So we had a flood group, a fire group, a blizzard group, and a solar flare group. So.
Solar flares, I love it. Thanks for sharing, Sam. Trisha, you're next. Trisha teaches at Weber Middle School in Fort Collins, and she was also one of our great PD co-teachers during this summer PD session for us.
So thanks, Justin. Yeah, my name is Trisha, and I'm a 4th generation teacher. Again, it seems to be a trend here. It runs in the family, right? And I used to teach high school. For 7 years, I taught high school, and now I teach middle school. This is my 17th year teaching. And I got into the Earth Force, I think it's about 4 years ago or so. Whenever Earth Force, they reached out to our district science coordinator, and they said, hey, there's professional development. This was before Justin was on board. And I think Brittany and I were in that training together. And I don't know if anybody else from that training followed through, but Brittany and I stuck with it. And that year, it was all about flooding. So we live where my school is. It's in the middle of an old kind of prairie. And so we don't have like an imminent risk of wildfire. We don't have imminent risk of flooding. We're not in a floodplain, but some of our students are. Some of our students are living in floodplain areas. And we certainly had students this year that were evacuated due to fires because they live on the backside of Horsetooth Mountain, and that area was at risk with our Cameron Peak fire, which is still burning. They hope to have it contained, I think, by Saturday. And then after we did our flooding project, then we went into emergency kits, and we had an amazing emergency kit project. And then last year we did emergency kits for our elementary mountain schools, because the principal of the mountain schools is married to our school librarian, and our former assistant principal was the principal of the mountain schools. And we haven't quite finished that project yet because we were just getting ready to wrap it all up and the pandemic hit. And I wasn't going to write the proposal for my students. So I'm not sure what we're going to do this year, but that remains to be seen. But I highly encourage anyone who hasn't participated in the RISE Challenge to give it a try because it's a lot of fun.
Thanks for sharing, Trisha. And I don't want to be remiss for leaving out Brittany and Steve from also being part of our PD facilitation this summer. They were fantastic and just popped in my head. So thanks, guys. Well, thank you all for being here and introducing yourselves to the group. I kind of, as a way of structuring this, was thinking, well, I want this to be a casual kind of conversation, and I know that we're going to do that, but I also kind of want to make sure that we have a lot of breathing room for time and not get too in the weeds. So I've kind of broken up some questions by roughly steps in the process, the Earth Force process. But how this is going to work is I'm going to have one speaker, one person, one of our guest speakers take the lead on each question, and we'll rotate through you. And if others want to jump in and follow up on that question, they're free to do so. Also, if we have questions from the audience, feel free to put those in the chat or unmic yourself at the right time and give a question. But that's kind of roughly how this is going to work today. So hopefully everyone can have some airtime and we can cover a lot of ground at the same time. So you guys have told us about yourselves, kind of how you got into education, the RISE Challenge. What I would like to hear, though, is kind of a nice warm up here. Is what excites you about doing these projects? Think back to the projects that you've done. What excited you about doing that work? What was different? And Brittany, you're right next to me on the screen, so I'm going to go to you first.
That's what I get for logging on early. Okay. This is actually perfect because I really love doing hands-on projects with my students. I find that it excites them. They feel like it's more useful to their lives because they actually are being heard by the challenges that we're doing with them. And so, yeah, just having the kids' input and teaching them kind of the steps of how it all works. And so then they know as they get older, kind of who they would need to contact if they want to do something similar. So if there's ever something in their life that they're like, oh yeah, I really want to do XYZ. Now they know how to do XYZ because we did it together. So yeah, just for me, their excitement makes me excited about wanting to do the projects.
Do you want us to just jump in?
Yeah, Steve, that'd be fine.
Okay, so very similar to Brittany's, I'd say the student engagement's really the highlight of it. It's sometimes a little bit challenging to get them excited at first. And that's something I've noticed, or to settle in on one project. But once they get into it, then they start realizing, oh, this is a real deal, you know, and it's something that we can make a difference with. So I think that's one of the most exciting parts of it.
Yeah, Steve, I like that you mentioned that it's kind of hard to get them going at the beginning, because a lot of times you almost get the sense it's like, this is just stuff I read about on the news, and helping them make that transition of like, yes, and why are you hearing about it on the news? Maybe because it's important and you can actually get involved and you can learn about these things. And I think being able to do some of the things that are hyper local, like even looking around your own building, like I even was pretty shocked at how many things I found that I was like, oh yeah, that gutter just goes right into the underneath the building. That's not good. So there's so many things you can find, and getting kids to start looking at things differently is really cool.
So I agree with all of those things. And I think I would add to it that one of the reasons I like doing it is that at the end of it, the kids really feel important. They feel like they have done something important either for their school or for their community. And it lets them have a voice and it lets them feel empowered, which I think is a great sort of leadership skill that will help them going forward.
So, I love this comment about, you know, getting started, right? And getting started is always the most difficult thing for anything, be it a diet, a new exercise routine. I'm on a diet right now, guys. And I'm curious to hear what, you know, what do you guys do to launch this kind of project with your students? What kind of prep do you guys do? And Steve, I'm going to pick on you for that one.
All right. Well, it's been a little bit challenging this year, especially with all of the turmoil of back and forth in school, to to come in with a good focus. But I think what I've tried to do in the past is throw open the whole idea of what are some of the biggest issues that are facing our community, and making the community have different meanings. So it could be the school buildings, all in Estes Park, all three levels of schooling, elementary, middle school, and high school, are all on one campus. So we could have a problem that's campus-wide or community-wide. And we also have some outlying communities that kids come in from. So it can extend out to that way, but really trying to get them to think about what can we do, like Sam said, locally that makes a difference.
Maybe let's care to add on. What do you guys do to kind of launch this with your students? How do you introduce this to them?
I've used just some of the initial surveys, and going on, like actually leaving the building and going on walks with kids and getting them to notice things. Right where we are, there's a bunch of flood mitigation, like engineering that is right near our school that they've walked past hundreds of times and never thought about. So going down and showing them that, and having them actually sort of think about like, what is this for? What purpose could it serve? And then also like, just finding some of those for us, the flood that was right by Spring Creek, and seeing footage of that, and then walking down and seeing like the statue that they've like sat around and played on but never bothered to read the plaque, and like seeing like what's there, seeing the high water marks that they've also walked past and never seen, seeing how this can impact them. It might not have impacted them yet, it might not be them at this moment, but showing them that no one walks through their day expecting something like that to happen, but it can. And so being able to like sort of have those maybe slightly scary conversations with them can really, I think, sort of open them up to looking at things a little bit differently.
And I would say for me, I've approached it different ways. So the very first couple of years when I did Earth Force, I taught an ELO. It's our skinny 40-minute period at the very end of the day. And it was an environmental science class. And I had been teaching the same class, and it's only a quarter long, like for years. And I was like, I need something different. And I just went to that training with Brittany, and I was like, okay, you guys, how do you feel about maybe participating in a competition? And, you know, we could win money and we could like change something with our campus. Are you guys down for that? Let me explain how it might work. And then Justin came in and talked about it. So I kind of gave them a choice, and I said, oh, it's a competition and you can make a difference and we can get money and you're kind of going to be locally famous. And that was sort of the buy-in for them. And then in the years that followed, I was like, hey, look at what happened. This is what we did last year. Do you guys want to, you know, do something like that this year? And they're like, yeah, we want to outdo what they did the year before. So that was sort of the way that I hooked the kids into it. But I always gave them a choice. And I said, hey, if you guys don't want to do this, then we're not going to invest in it. And of course, they always want to do it.
That's great. I love that. Do you want to be famous? Every kid cares about that now, right? In the age of Twitch and Twitter and all the things. That's awesome. Brittany, do you have anything to add, or we can move on if you don't?
I'll just kind of echo what Trisha said. That's how I started it with mine. It was in my ELO, so my little short class at the end of the day. And yeah, we started it as, hey, how about this? This is a challenge. What do you want to do? And then it was a choice for them each step of the way. Like, do you want to do it? Yes or no? We did it. And then it was, okay, now what kind of like thing do you want to look at? So it was always lots of options for them. And even just opening it up to have the time for them to talk about like stories and experiences that they've had, and then looking at it through that lens of, okay, you had the story and experience, how does that play into what we're talking about? And so they really got into that. And then now it kind of advertises itself, well, when we're at school, because I have our big winner checks up above my desk. So I always have kids ask me, oh, what's that about? And then they're like, oh, they get very excited about it because they see that it's up there and they want to know more, or they've had an older sibling do it. And so then a lot of times they're asking me about it before I even have a chance to tell them about it. So it advertises itself.
I love that. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that.
I was just going to say, it doesn't hurt either to have some of those natural disasters happening right near you as we go, you know? So between the fires and the floods we've had so far, it's not that unusual to say, we need help with this. So, yeah. Yeah,
I think it's safe to say if you live in Colorado, like it's not a matter of like if, it's when is it going to happen? Yeah. That's a great point, Steve. So we've talked about how you guys kind of prepare your students, but how do you prepare yourselves? How do you go about planning for this kind of project-based learning program, this unit? What does that look like for you? And you don't have to give me all the particulars, but I would just love to hear how your general approach is for planning. I know it's a very deeply personal conversation. I have to plan, just so you guys know, full disclosure, I am been working out of a classroom in Sheridan remotely, and doing like once or twice a week, and having to plan like, you know, the day before sometimes, hopefully like a week before, but you know, so it's very organic for me. I got kind of thrown into it, but I know how planning can be, you know, it's a very, everyone has their own approach and it's hard to articulate it entirely, but we would love to hear, you know, tips for planning for this.
I can start. I have maybe a little bit of a more unique situation because of the nature of our school and our schedule. We're a project-based school by nature anyways, so we have the ability to, basically we have like 2.5 hour long chunks every day for a whole quarter that we're working on one project. And so generally I try and start with just looking at the end date of either the competition or the end of the quarter, wherever we're at, and then structuring out the different steps of the process and having some major checkpoints. And I try and get, if I have like a field trip that I want to get planned to go see someplace that's going to be more unusual than when we normally just walk down to the park and things like that, or if we have guest speakers, which we've had some really good guest speakers come in from a variety of different places. I try and get those on my calendar, and then I actually leave a lot of it open, and some of that is due to my own procrastination, and like Justin said, planning day to day, but a lot of that is also letting the kids drive the bus and letting the kids, showing them, being transparent with them about that overall plan of here are the major checkpoints we need to get to. By the end of this, we need to have a proposal with a budget, with all these things, and that is our end goal. And then, you know, maybe giving them the idea of like a rough draft would be great to have done here. We're going to have our initial scaffold here, and our brainstorm needs to be done around here. But then filling in that rest of that time, it's kind of up to them and up to being reactive to them in terms of what they're interested in. The group that I worked with last year, solar flares was not an initial idea, but I had 2 kids that were like really into solar flares, and I was like, yeah, okay, sure, let's do that. So being able to be like adaptive to what they want has been, it's kind of scary, but it's also like really fun to do it that way.
Thanks for sharing that, Sam. I would say, like, in general, the Earth Force process, right, it allows for messiness in the project, right? There's kind of this recursive piece there. Like, you do an initial investigation, and then you decide on, you know, you see all these issues that are out there. You democratically decide on an issue with your students. You do research by talking to stakeholders in the community, by pulling up documents, you know, all the things. I love stakeholders, and you get all these ideas, and it's time to kind of narrow it down again. Okay, well, what are we going to do here? You know, we have all these ideas. What seems most viable for our time and for our project and for our budget? And then, you know, moving forward like that, you need to sometimes pull back from the research and say, oh, wait a minute, you know, like maybe we need to do a little bit more investigation into our community. Or you get into the planning phase and the action phase, and you run into an obstacle you did not expect to find there. you did not anticipate, and you have to go back to the research piece. It can be a little bit messy like that, but I think what's great about that is that this is how work is done out in real life, right? And so students are getting that very real, very practical experience that will serve them well in high school and college and later in life. I want to address a question real fast. Anne asked, how has the challenge structure for RISE been revised since schools are using online learning predominantly? Just real briefly, I would say, we at EarthForce, we've pivoted as far as our PD and our resources go, online resources for supporting in-class work step-by-step to digital documents that you can take and adapt to your own needs. They're no longer in PDF form. So that's one of the things we've done. And we've shown through our PDs that there's all these tools out there for using to help support project management, which is essentially part of the role as a teacher, is facilitating that project management with students as they get locked into an issue, into the research, and into exploring options for solutions, and making and kind of detailing out those solutions. So there's great resources like Trello. I have a teacher right now who's using Trello with a class of 10th graders and the chemistry teacher. So it's an English teacher and a chemistry teacher using Trello. They really like it because you can link files in there. You can have different sections. It's basically a project board, right? It's a virtual project board that you can do all project related activities on and have this place that it keeps everything. So you can go back, reference things, follow up on things, and move things from like a, to do, to in progress, to done pile. So there's a lot of tools out there to do this. Finally, I would say a lot of this work is really around talking to stakeholders. And actually, it turns out talking to stakeholders is easier than ever now. You don't have to have them come into the classroom. You can just have them beam in via Zoom. And it's so much more convenient for everyone. So I think that that's been a tremendous change for us in this program. And I think it's going to serve everyone really well. When it comes time to the summit, which is kind of our culminating event and Expo of Learning, we're going to be doing a virtual platform for that. We're still working out the hows of that, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great experience. So Anne, if you have any follow-up questions, please put that in the chat or let us know. Again, Sam, thank you for kind of sharing how you approach this yourself. So I guess one of the things I'm curious to hear is, you guys have been doing this work for a few years now. Have you guys accumulated some resources that you really like to go to when it comes to like natural hazards education for your students? And if so, could you share some of those? And I'm going to pick on, who's next here? Sam, you just went. I'm going to skip you. Trisha.
Yeah, so one of my favorite resources to use is the Concord Consortium. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with them, but they have a really amazing flood and hurricane module. They also have a plate tectonics module, but they are launching in beta mode this fall, the wildfire module. So currently I am teaching natural disasters actually right now in 6th grade science, and I am doing a combination of using the HeartForce activity along with the Concord Consortium activity, and it's perfect for remote learning. So I would encourage you to take a look at those, as well as some of the activities that are already kind of embedded in the EarthForce resources. I always like to start off with, what is an environmental citizen, and having kids think about that, because their whole idea about an environmental citizen is somebody who doesn't litter or maybe recycles, and that's the extent of it. So that's always a great activity. There's also another super activity that's in the EarthForce. It's kind of like your community coat of arms. And so we'll always do one for Fort Collins, and we'll say, hey, what is our like, what is our town about? And the kids will, you know, talk about the events that we have over the summer. They'll link CSU, they'll talk about Horsetooth Reservoir, they'll talk about the trails, and then we'll talk about, well, who do you think the biggest employers are? And then of course, somehow beer ends up in the conversation and we have to sidetrack the breweries a little bit because that's not what we want to talk about. But eventually we come to like who the stakeholders are and that we're a community. So those are some of my favorite resources. Again, that's Concord Consortium, the HeartForce resources, and the ones that EarthForce has.
Alyssa, thanks for sharing that with everyone.
Justin, I'll say, like up in Estes Park, and I'm not sure if in a larger community like Fort Collins, this is the same, but it seems like the people who have public office are really happy to come in. So we get the fire department in there and the town planner. The national park is one of our neighbors, and we usually get somebody coming in from there to talk about the issues that we're dealing with. It seems like that's a real positive thing. And some of the nonprofits as well. So we have, you know, the Watershed Coalition up here, and we have the Nature Conservancy and stuff like that. Those folks are also more than happy to come in and visit with the students and kind of get their minds thinking about what they can do.
Hey, Steve, can I follow up on that? How did you learn about all those people and groups?
A part of it's just being in a smaller community, I think. And some of our students, their parents are firefighters, or their parents are working for the town or the national park or something like that. So that's it makes it easier for us. But if you contact the main office for any of those groups, it seems like, whether it's the fire department or whoever, they're usually really willing to hook you up with who could come in and be the community liaison with the classroom.
That's great. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking out your local government pages. Most communities have some sort of stormwater department, which often have a lot of information about flooding and stormwater practices in the community. Also, there's the fire authority, you know, the fire chief in your town. That's definitely somewhere to go to, just for like immediate circumstances. And I think folks oftentimes overlook people inside the school and inside the district. I mean, there are special administrative personnel for responding to like environmental safety and stuff like that you can reach out to and have a lot of information and a lot of contacts, a lot of traction with other stakeholders in the community. Well, great. Thanks for sharing some of those. Are there any other resources, favorite resources, guys? I have shared a link to the, Alyssa has shared a link to the EarthForce Rice Challenge Colorado resources page. We're continually adding to this, but it's stuff that I've gone through and I said, that's cool. And I'm including it there, including links to the HeartForce and their materials, but also stuff like these videos that we're making right now. So I think these are that's a place to look along with HeartForce and the resources already mentioned. So we're talking a lot about getting students talking to stakeholders. And to me, that just like equates like research. That's research, research, research. How do you guys approach supporting students during this kind of open research phase of a project like this? What kind of structures do you put in place to help support students and keep them on track? And sorry, I'm going to pick on Brittany. You're next.
Okay. So what I typically will do is we sit down and look at the issue that we've chosen, that they kind of all decided that we were going to work on. And then we look at it together and say, okay, what steps do you think we might need to do in order to get our end product? And so then we make a flow chart together with our main steps and choices, and then we can kind of move stuff around if there's another idea that comes up and they're a little bit out of order. So I kind of help them order things in a way that makes sense. And then we will split into groups and kind of group the different ideas together. If there's some that can be grouped together, or if it's one that's kind of on its own, then that stays its own little group of kids. And then they will get into their groups, and then within their groups, and they make steps they need to do in order to complete their goal. So it's basically processing with them and giving them leeway to kind of figure stuff out on their own, but having those like main points they need to reach. And then if they need help beyond that, giving them resources, kind of pushing them in the right direction. And then like if they need help contacting a specific stakeholder, I will get them in touch with that person. And there have been years that I have contacted the stakeholder. The kids will write their little spiel to the stakeholder, and then I'll contact them, because for a while they felt like I had more pull than them, but now they're much more comfortable kind of doing it on their own. And so now they'll be like, okay, I'm going to write this email. Will you check it and like make sure it looks good? And then I'm going to send it. And so that's what I've done with my kids to kind of give them support.
That's awesome. Do you do like weekly check-ins, or what's your way of kind of keeping your thumb on things?
Yeah. It kind of depends on how often I see the kids. It's either a weekly or a bi-weekly check-in, kind of depending on where we're at in the process. Sometimes it's like at the end of every class period, whatever we're doing, checking to see that they've made their points of progress, because sometimes it's a very small amount of time that we have to get stuff done in. So it just kind of depends on what class I'm doing it in, how often I will check in.
That's great. Yeah, I love hearing this. I've been doing this on my own, so like I know how I approach it too, but I'm learning from you guys so much. Thank you. So Alyssa reminds us that we have tips cards, right? Do any of you guys use the tips cards with your students? Because I find them to be a really cool resource, especially for kind of the basics like writing emails and stuff like that.
So that was what made me think of it, was the email writing, because I know there's one in there that's like how to write an email or something. But just if you all don't know about those, they're a great resource that are like student facing that you can use to help students do things like write an email or interview a stakeholder and things like that. So
yeah, I'll admit that I didn't really check into those tips cards until this summer when we were doing our summer sessions. And I realized, oh, I've missed out on this great resource that's right here. And so it's nice to see that. And I hope that we can use that this year.
I've used them trying to, like, if there's a day where I'm like, all right, I'm not totally sure what we need to do next. Basically, if I grab this tips card, I don't usually get more than a few in before I'm like, oh yeah, we can do that. Great. Like, so it's actually a great thing to do in terms of like helping to keep me moving the kids forward, because there's always good like next steps that can be in there.
That's great, Sam. So part of the research phase is also trying to get students to understand that there's these, like policies, there's rules, and there's these practices that kind of undergird or that are at the root of the problem that they're looking at. How do you guys support students in thinking about that and discussing policies and practices and kind of understanding that in the research? Is there anything special that you guys do? And I'm going to pick on, who am I picking on next? I'm losing track of folks. Steve, I'm going to pick on you.
Well, I guess that I'm thinking of policies in terms of getting the kids actually involved in the projects. The local school district policies have been something that we've had to, I won't say fight with, but we had to make our point about, so we wanted kids to go out and do projects that involved using tools and transportation to get there and stuff like that. And getting permission slips, all of those things needed to be thought through. And sometimes I would brainstorm with the kids, what can we do? How should we approach this? And sometimes I just kind of took it on my own, or with Jesse's help there as well. And we did the legwork to begin with, and then put it into the students' hands to say, okay, guys, are we ready to move forward? Do we have the right tools? Do we have the right timeline? Have we lined up work projects that we need to do, and so on? So I don't think we've done anything that really required any extra community-wide approval, more from the school district, I'd say. Yet, Steve. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to follow up on that. Like, I think that question, it kind of doubles back on the stakeholders. I feel like for me, when I bring stakeholders in with students and have them talk with each other. You know, stakeholders are usually pretty good about outlining like what are the like salient, you know, policies or practices that are kind of at play with the issue. But have you guys ever ran into any challenges with that with stakeholders? Trisha's nodding her head. Trisha, I'm gonna pick on you because you're nodding your head.
Well, yeah, even within our own district, you know, we can butt heads with risk management and what we might want to install or how it gets installed on our campus. And even if we have money, then they're like, well, maybe it should be done this way instead, or, oh, no, we're not going to do that. So, yeah, I think it's important to realize that there may be stumbling blocks and challenges, but then that makes it even the sweeter when the project, you know, is actually done. And to kind of piggyback on what Steve said, one of the things that I do to start with that whole idea of policies is, first of all, sixth graders don't even know what a policy is, like what's a policy or a stakeholder. So we talk about like, oh, how many of you ride the bus? Well, what are the rules to be safe on the bus? Okay, what are the rules that we have in our school? Oh, guess what? The bus and the school aren't the only place that have rules, right? They're going to be rules within the city. They're going to be rules within the parameters of the district. And then once we narrow down what our project is, then we identify what those policies are and make sure that that we can meet them, you know, when we're doing our project.
Thanks for sharing that, Trisha. Yeah, that's a great example. And I would actually reminds me a teacher here in Denver wanted to install a cigarette butt collection box at a site, and they wanted to do a fundraiser around it. And then they found out that there's all this red tape at the school level, at the district level around fundraising. And so it was quite the like eye-opening experience for that teacher. So I would encourage you guys to think about those things as you're moving forward in your projects. Like, okay, like what things might bite us, unexpectedly. As it turns out, the teacher was able to circumvent or figure out how to deal with that. And that's a great learning experience, right? It was a learning experience for the students too, to have that like communally, to do that in partnership with the teacher.
Justin, real quick, I was just going to add that we had some students in a different state that were working on a project and they wanted to change a policy, and the folks in charge kept saying like, no, that doesn't need to be changed, or that's not, and they just kept learning more about it and bringing their research. They did something like 17 stakeholder presentations just to be like, no, this is not right. This is what we want to do. And they were eventually effective at changing that. But sometimes to change a policy or practice, there is like, it could be anything from like getting a field trip, that kind of policy thing, to like, if there's a policy within a school you really want to change, there can be a lot of pushback in those places, but it is a chance for students to really find their voice and know that issue really well and like speak out. It's pretty powerful when that happens.
Yeah, that's a great
learning
point.
Experiences. Yeah, great life experiences.
And I think that's like really highlights how this kind of project really emphasizes that civic engagement piece. And like that's an opportunity, that's a learning opportunity there to engage students in their civic skills, right? And the development of the civic skills. Advocating for change to power is something not a lot of adults know how to do anymore. So moving on, just because we're checking on time here and we have a little bit of time left, I have a couple of questions left for you guys. We've talked about beginning projects, we've talked about researching, but at the core of the Earth Force process and the work that you're doing with these students, where the students are really driving the projects, is this kind of this decision-making element, right? Where students are discussing the issue, they're deliberating different points of the issue, aspects of it, and then they're deciding what to do as a group. How do you guys support that? What does that look like? What is your favorite move there? And I'm gonna pick on, I'm Sam, I'm gonna reverse my flow. I'm gonna pick on you now.
All right. I've tried a lot of things. Some of them work one year and then not the other. Some of them work better with some kids and not the other. So trying to diversify how we make decisions and making lots of smaller decisions as we go to figure out, okay, what's going to work best with what group. I generally try and encourage kids to like think about decisions based on their like what they want to take action on, rather than just what they want to like learn about, or even worse, who they want to work with. Because there's always, of course, the like, oh, I saw Billy's, he's wanted to do that one, so I'm going to do that one too. So anonymizing things, having multiple rounds of things, starting with lots of ideas, and then basically like vetoing, like voting for like, we don't want to do that, we don't want to do that, we don't want to do that. So voting by elimination, then kids end up with an answer that none of them actually voted for, but they all actually were like, oh yeah, that's actually what we wanted to do. That sort of flipping it in that way has worked well. I think also being careful with the first year I did it, there was a group that they decided that and then we went through the process, and I let them kind of have full control, and they wanted to repave a block of city roadway with permeable paving, which was cool. They did a bunch of research, and they're like, okay, Sam, it's going to be $270,000 to do this. And I was like, okay, no. So that was like by the end of the process, this is kind of where we got to that. And it was then kind of a little bit of a letdown, because they really, it was a wildly unreasonable thing for them to try and do. So trying to head them off at the pass a bit with some decisions, and make them realistic so that they can have more of a sense of accomplishment, rather than just recognizing like, wow, that is really expensive. I see why we just make them out of solid asphalt.
So what I'm hearing is that you're kind of approaching this not from you dictate what is done, but like more as like this partnership piece, right? You're riffing with each other.
Definitely. And trying to, maybe there definitely are times where I have an end goal in mind, and you can kind of play the like, play dumb a bit, and kind of let them fall into the idea that you've had from the beginning. But just giving them that opportunity to kind of have the ownership and the authority that it is their idea can be really cool. And that can be even just like starting with all those ideas, and letting them throw out crazy ideas, and then weed them out, and make them, when they start weeding them out, why are you weeding them out? Is that one too expensive? Is that one, for us, transportation is a big issue for us. We have a lot of stuff that we can walk to because we're in the middle of town, but we have no buses. So if we want to go someplace that's like more than a mile away, or is not along the max line in town, like we can't do it. So there's been projects that we've wanted to do up by like Horsetooth, but we can't get there. So that one's off the table, unfortunately. So just having to be realistic about what those decisions are, and making it clear to them why we are making those decisions. So it's not just like, oh, I don't want to do that. It's, I would love to do that, but X, Y, and Z.
That was really well put. Thanks for sharing that, Sam. Does anybody else want to jump in on that? Hey, go ahead, Tricia.
Yeah, so I would echo everything that he said, especially like putting all the ideas out there and then voting off the ones that are not going to work. And there is an activity in the Earth Force resources that will help kids kind of decide with that voting process. And I can't recall what all the steps are, but it's kind of the same thing, like which one will make the most impact, what will be too expensive. It's sort of like the pros and the cons, like what are the good things about this, what are the bad things about that. And then I like to use a lot of digital apps for democratic voting. So dot storming is a really good one. I've just used a voting poll before. Anything where the kids can have fun and they feel like, oh yeah, I'm making a choice and it's actually my choice and nobody's like erasing my idea. And so we do a lot of those little voting steps along the way until we finally get the one thing that we want to do.
So it sounds like scaffolding this is important too, right? It's not like starting out with these really small decision-making moments, building on them, and having them throughout the entire experience is really important. Thanks for sharing that. I gotta say, I love that Padlet, you can vote on Padlet too. It's wonderful. Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there now. It's fantastic. So once we get to the action phase, we're kind of like in this moment where it's okay, we've done all this planning, we've done all this research, we know what we want to do, now it's time to take action. And we're kind of fortunate in this room right now that there are several of you who have already, all of you have done projects with your students where they've taken action. What is it like supporting students through the action phase of their projects? And Steve, I'm gonna call on you real fast.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's exciting. It's one of the highlights, I think, to see it come to fruition and you're actually out doing stuff. We've had the chance to be a part of a community. They call it a mountain festival. It's kind of falls between Earth Day and Arbor Day and all of that kind of stuff. But we've done presentations there and displays. And then we've also tried to build in a summer project with our program, especially after the competition, to put it into practice. Last year, obviously, it was really a kind of a wash, and we don't know exactly, like Tricia said, where we're going to go with what happened last year. But back me up again. Tell me what you asked me, because I got sidetracked. So,
well, I'm just kind of trying to get a feel for how you support students through the action part of the project.
So, and kind of like Sam was saying, we just broke into smaller groups, and each group had certain responsibilities. So one group was putting together, they were making buttons to give out to people at this mountain festival. And another group was focusing on a model that they were building that they wanted to show wildfire and how it would burn uphill and stuff like that. So I think breaking it down into their interest levels and trying to keep everybody involved all the time is a really important piece.
Anybody else want to add to that? Got a few minutes left, so if no one's got anything, Sam.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say the biggest thing I've had success with is breaking tasks into smaller things, and sometimes you might have to add a few things into a project because if you have a big enough group, everybody's got to have something to do. I think one of the things that kills the vibe and the momentum more than anything is having kids that are in a group and the work is getting done, but you got two kids that are just like, it's being done. I don't know what you want me to do.
Right.
So it's the other side of the coin of when you're doing really cool, engaging things that have a purpose. If that purpose is being accomplished by other people, then the kids that are not doing it are like, well, then I guess I don't need to do it. So making sure that there's enough things to do and they're in groups that are of appropriate size for that.
Yeah, that's an important challenge to note. Thanks for sharing that for sure. It's a great insight. So we've kind of nice. We spent this hour talking about how we do these projects. We've been reflecting on our work. And in the last step of the Earth Force process and in the end of the RISE Challenge, we do a summit, a year-end summit, where we invite folks to present their projects and win prizes and do that thing. And it's this really great reflective learning opportunity. You know, how it makes me think of assessment in a way. And I want to know real fast, like, how do you approach assessing student work during these projects? You gotta give them a grade, right? Or a pass fail or what have you. So how do you approach that? What's your approach to assessing student work during this project? And Brittany, I'm gonna call on you.
All right, so I do it in a couple of ways. When we sit down and we talk about like the things that they need to do within their steps, they actually end up creating their own rubric to see if they've met those goals or not. And so by them creating the rubric, they know exactly what they're going to be graded on or what's going to be looked for their section of the project. So that's one really easy way to grade them. It's not a surprise because they helped me create the rubric that they're getting graded off of. And then it's nice because it takes me less time to kind of come up with stuff because each group is a little bit different. So their end goal and the things that you're looking for from each group is going to end up being different, at least the way that I do it. So the rubric grading is awesome because they know if they've accomplished it or not, if they sort of did it, but it like wasn't all the way there, or if it didn't even happen. So that is, at least for me, the best way to grade them is through rubrics.
Thanks for sharing that. That's great. Anybody else have something they like to use? Does anybody use portfolios? I mean, Do you do a portfolio approach at all? No? Interesting. Cool.
We do, but we do like as a whole school. So it's not necessarily specific to this. It's a bigger thing.
Right, built in. Yeah. Well, hey, you guys, thank you so much. I actually want to conclude this by asking you guys all to reflect on one question. I know we're just over time, so I want to make this fast. What have you learned from doing these projects with your students? Think about it for a second.
Can we start?
Yes.
So for me, one of the things that I've learned is that there's a lot more possibilities than the things that hold us back, you know, and we just have to be aware of what we can inspire kids to start doing and then help them move forward in that process. So the process is more important, I think, than the end product, but the end product is nice when we have that competition there. So, yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
I'll quickly jump in. So I've learned that all kinds of students, any student can participate in this. Justin will know that oftentimes the ELO classes that I've been given, these are the kids that sometimes have a lot of trauma in their lives. Sometimes they have a very difficult life and they feel like they don't have a say or a voice in anything. Oftentimes the students I have in this class are students who are not on the gifted and talented track. There may be students who are not even meeting the standards and not doing well on, you know, the CMAS tests and the MAPS tests and all the ways that we test them. But once it's time for them to work together and do this, they rise to the occasion and never cease to amaze me. So all learners can do it. And sometimes the ones that you think might not be the ones that would be best suited for the project are actually the ones that are the best suited for the project.
That's awesome. That makes me smile.
I think just the process over the product has been really important. I think trying to get kids to see that what they're learning as they go along is kind of the point. And yeah, like the end product is great, but that's kind of the cherry on top. And them being able to see that this is how most of the world operates, and that it's messy and it involves a lot of people and it involves a lot of problems and it involves talking to people. And I think it's been great to have the ability to have kids that are like, well, I don't like, they get to the point where they're trying to have a conversation with somebody that's out in the community and they're like, I'm not getting an email back. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I have a deadline. It's like, yeah, that's a real thing, man. You can follow up, you can find their phone number. We could find another stakeholder. We can do like, so being able to see that with them and sort of learn that process along with them has been really good.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that.
And for me, I'll kind of echo what Sam said. It's really problem solving. And it's so neat when you have kids that want their hand held the entire time, that when you finally get to that point, they start figuring out, oh, I'm actually a really great problem solver. And yeah, there's all these problems that we hit because it's inevitable. But as a group, we're able to come up with more ideas to try to find a solution to whatever that current problem is. And so them being able to work together, but then also becoming good problem solvers, that's like the two best things for me. It's so awesome, and it stays with them their entire lives. And then they feel like, oh, I can do this. I'm not going to let whatever obstacle that I have in my way currently like stay there. Might suck for a little bit, but then I can get over it because there's all these people that now I know how to talk to and make my problems like either a little bit easier, or I can flow around them, or however that works for them.
I want to thank you guys so much. This has been a really great session, maybe long overdue. So I'm so glad we got together to do this. One question to our speakers, there's folks here in the audience and who may be watching eventually. Are you open to receiving correspondence? And if so, could you put your email in the chat real fast for people?
Sure.
And for those of you who are attending this to hear these wonderful speakers talk about their approaches to community-based problem solving, natural hazard education, I encourage you guys to come to December 16th, 4 to 5 p.m. to our intro to the RISE Challenge session, where we'll go over the basics of the program, and I'll field any questions that you have about getting started. You can find more information at earthforce.org. Yeah, this has been recorded, so we're going to make this available online on our website and our YouTube page. I just want to thank you, everyone, again, for making the time to come here. It's been a fantastic session.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, educators. Thanks for all you do. You guys are amazing. Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, all.
Bye, all.